Coffee with the Editor is proudly brought to you by IRZ and the Naledi Group of companies, which includes Naledi Ring Rollers, Composite Brake Components, and Naledi Foundries. Hi, thank you very much for joining me for Coffee with the Editor. You do something different. You don't do anything to do with trains.
Not yet.
Not yet.
or have done some.
When I talk nothing to do with trains or anything to do with trains, I'm talking to the actual physical infrastructure and the rolling stock that you produce for those who move.
Yes.
Right. So tell me a little bit about Flexitank Systems.
Yeah, Flexitank Systems started as a division of Dunlop. This was 2004, and I bought into the division of Dunlop and restarted this division that was making rubber bags. But after about 2-3 years, we quickly found out that rubber is outdated, it's heavy, it doesn't work. So I developed a lot of new products, and Dunlop really didn't have a role to play anymore because they're in the rubber. So I took the company over and I started developing different technologies which are chemically compatible to the various things that we put into the bags. Flexi tanks, bladder tanks, there's all sorts of names for these things. And that's what we've developed to now. So we've now been on our own for about 12 years, and the business is doing good. But there's a massive potential in doing more. And
so you do have products that those who need to move via rail.
Yes. So let me explain the basic concept.
Yes, please.
So containers and isotainers, stainless steel for liquid, are extremely expensive. Okay. Often also what one finds is that you don't have a return trip. There's not always a liquid return trip. So what we make possible now is to say, well, you have a flatbed or a drop side or a container even, and you now get an opportunity for a liquid return trip. So what that effectively means is that instead of coming back empty, you can put in a load. A very good example, I think, is for molasses, for instance. It has no real value, so you can only transport it if it's very cheap. So if there's a free trip back, it becomes economically valuable and viable to actually start using molasses out of Africa into South Africa.
Let's talk about what else can be moved in these bags. Pre us shooting here, you were talking about copper concentrates.
No. So it's a little bit different.
Okay.
So what happens is that there are trucks going into Africa, and there's trucks coming back. Some have return loads and some don't. So what happens is a thing called dusticide. It's a polymer. So it's an emulsion, by lack of a better word. It's not toxic. That they put into the bags on the back of a flatbed. They then drive all the way to Zambia with this load, which they would normally transport in a tanker. Okay. The problem is once you're in Zambia, there's no liquids coming back. There's no opportunity to bring anything back, so the tanker would have to come back empty. What we now create is we put a bag on the back of a flatbed, which then takes the dusticide, which is an emulsion, a liquid, up to Zambia, to the copper mines, which they use, and then when they're there, they fold up the bag and they use it to bring back actual copper. So it's a fixed load. So it's the mix between hard goods and liquid.
Okay.
So think about the concept of wine in a box. Okay. So some people use containers. They put a bag inside, but you put 24,000 liters of liquid in a container. While on the way up, it could have had televisions or anything else in it. So it really is just. It's all about the making the opportunity for a flatbed or a container or anything else to make it duplicate its purpose. You can do liquid and hard goods. So in terms of your question, we have BASF. You've heard of them, no doubt, chemicals. They're using one of our bags like a Coca-Cola fridge. So let me explain to you the concept. They've got a customer in Nigeria who buys emulsion to make paint. The problem is they were sending IBCs, which is 1,000 liter bins in a container. But the guy in Nigeria only had capacity to store a certain amount. So what they did then is say, well, look, we can put the bag in the container, we can do double the volume, and then we'll put a bag on site where the factory is and decant it, so his transport costs effectively for the guy in Nigeria has gone to half. Because you can double load, and the why I say it's the Coca-Cola concept is because BASF still owns the bag. The moment they stop delivering, they take the bag away.
All right. Okay.
So there's a value chain. You know, there's a can I mention the one in Maputo in Beira?
Absolutely.
So in the South African context, in terms of HESCAM, there's no real legislation about HESCAM in the bags on trains, but on road, so that's the road ordinance, which is very much centered on the European model, is we can't put hazardous chemical in the bag without secondary containment, and there's all sorts of requirements. However, in Africa, and I'll mention the Australia and the Chile example, there were stainless steel trailers running from Beira to Tet with fuel, diesel, Jet A1, petrol, etc. The road in Africa is so bad that the torsion on the actual tankers would cause the tankers and the supports of the tankers to crack. So after 6 months, they'd have to redo the tankers. And we had a customer who I think got a special signature or permission from the governor or whoever is in charge, and they bought 15 bags from us, and they're now putting them inside the side tippers which bring the coal. So basically now what's happened is that there's about 140 trucks per day that come from Tet to Beira with coal. They're all going back empty. But what's happened now, instead of using the stainless steel containers, they're now using the bags.
And the bags just go straight.
It's a bucket, you know. Yeah. It's a side tipper.
Yes.
So they clean it out. They put a slip sheet just for extra protection. They put the bag inside. But here's the interesting thing. So the transporter is very happy with this, and he's got permission to transport it. The oil company won't load it in the bag. So the stainless steel tankers that they had, they're now running 4 kilometers from the depot to the fuel company.
Yes.
They then decant it into the bags on site, or they decant it into the storage facility that they have. Then they drive 450 kilometers, which they would have driven empty. Okay, and they do the same on the other side. So they decant it into their bag, and then they take a normal tanker to deliver it to the mine.
Okay.
The mine is now considering, finally, after seeing this, and they're seeing it's a farce.
Yes.
You know, that they're now going to actually accept it direct from the bags. You know, which is take out another leg of it. So, in terms of trains, and I know it's not the same thing, but we have the road trains in Australia. The Minister of Minerals has special powers because resource countries, if I can call them that, or resource-based countries. It's critical that they compete on the international market, so cost is an issue. So when they can bring diesel and Jet A1 and hazardous chemicals into the outback, okay, for free, it has an effect on actually getting the coal and the iron ore to the port.
Yes.
Which is, as a country, makes sense. You know, we complain about the railways and we complain about all sorts of things about the cost of getting it to port. Well, if you could get all the fuel to Joburg or to wherever it is, or Oegis, or you know, by train, and there are trains running, okay, it would have a massive saving in terms of the fuel costs. But you know, in Australia and Chile, we've delivered bags to Chile. They actually use the savings as cost saving for delivering the resources, the coals and the iron ores and things like that to the port.
What would the comparative value be? So let's say, you know, I've seen the rolling stock, the tanking, you know, the tank rolling stock. I'm not entirely sure what their load capacity is. 46, 48 tons. All right. So, I mean, what like additional value would the bag be versus just a tanker on rail?
Okay, so first you've got to look at the capital expenditure. Okay, and I'd like to simplify it a little bit because I know the numbers. Okay, I haven't got in-depth knowledge about the rail. But let's look at an ISO container, a stainless steel ISO container on the back of a train. They load 2. You know, they get the two. They look like a steel frame with a
Yes.
with a unit inside. So, and I'll use an actual example. So, if you take that from Fochville, you know, from BME, where we've done some transport on rail, you take 2 of those containers and you bring them up from Durban. You load them in Fochville and then you bring them back. A normal container will cost you about 20,000 rand, a box.
Yeah.
For another 10,000 rand, you put a bag inside. That's 30,000 rand. That bag, depending on what you're putting in, like food is only once off, but if you're using molasses or oil or anything else, we use the bags 10, 20 times. Okay. The capital cost of an isotainer, you're looking at about 250,000 rand.
Okay.
So it's 30,000 rand, 250,000 rand. So that's just the capital outlay. That's the one thing. The other thing, of course, is that if you have a bag and a box container, it's very flexible. Well, with the ISO container, the stainless steel ISO tankers, if there's no return trip, if there's no liquid coming back, there's no liquid coming back. So depending on the costing, so if there's food, for instance, you only use them once because of contamination and they're not easy to clean.
Yeah.
Okay, you use them once only, and it goes. The other side is that if you're starting to use them more frequently, you have to create an infrastructure.
Yes.
Because you have to take, okay, well, you know, there's 20 containers going, but there's one container with 20 tanks inside, empty. It goes up to 50, but 50 tanks, empty tanks in one container. So there's an infrastructure that one has to create. Okay. The other thing, of course, is that in terms of quality and risk, because risk is a big thing. Risk management in Africa is a challenge. So what has to happen is that one has to instruct and teach people how to use them and protect the bags and clean or not clean. But these are things that all need time and effort.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing that's required. So to get back to the sums, which was your initial question, it's the capital outlay to start with, and then there's the ongoing possibility of getting a return trip in liquid in something that costs a fraction of the price.
So this product would be ideally suited for those who are moving commodities.
Yes.
How would they be used from like a railway operator's perspective? I mean, how could a railway operator make use of your products to add value to their customers in terms of what they move for their customers?
Yeah. So we recently had an inquiry to come from Maputo to Randfontein, where there's a vegetable oil plant, because they said Durban is a little bit expensive. So it's unrefined. So although it's food, it doesn't require food quality because it still has to be cleaned up, processed, correct. So what happens is that they would buy what we call a fleet of bags. Okay, so they would buy 100 bags. And whenever there's a ship that lands, and whether it's Durban or it doesn't really matter, they will make sure that all the bags are there. And it's a matter of about an hour. Open the container doors or prepare the surface. You put the bag inside and you pump it like any other liquid commodity. Okay. Then 100 train, rail wagons, whatever they are, run to Randfontein. They would pump it empty, remove the bags, and they could then ship those containers or whatever it is to the inland harbour here? What's it called?
City Deep.
They could move to City Deep, and then they can do anything they like with those containers without having to look at liquid. Or if they want liquid, again, they can use the bags.
Yes.
But so one starts to operate a fleet of bags. That's what our biggest customer that does it for molasses, he calls it his fleet of bags. So he takes from various islands, okay, he ships, and then I think he also uses rail on one of the islands because they're quite small. So there's lots of road. There is, I think, in Wellington on the Northern Island. I think there's some rail. He uses rail, but the box is a box, you know, and they're used everywhere. An ISO container, a stainless steel ISO container for liquids, is expensive risk. A lot of people don't even want to send the ISO containers. In fact, they don't send ISO containers into Africa because the value. They get stolen. They don't come back. They don't actually come back. They don't. So in terms of risk management, it also has advantages in Africa, but it has to be managed properly. It's a logistical skill that one has to have.
Absolutely. So what opportunities do you see in both South Africa and the African market for your products?
Yeah, I can give you some examples of where we've been requested to actually quote. So I mean that would be an opportunity, I would think.
Yes.
So we were asked to supply bags for a customer who was going to go from Walvis Bay to Kitwe, which is also in the Copperbelt. There was a project by Rolls-Royce to create a new power generation plant, which heavy fuel oil. The problem was the logistics and the costs of getting the oil to Kitwe. Most of the copper is coming down at the moment by road, which is extremely expensive. And they're driving, either they drive by Botswana, South Africa, or they drive through Zimbabwe, South Africa to Durban. And there's big road operators that do this. But there is a rail between Walvis Bay into the Caprivi, and then there's a break, and then there's another rail. And it's actually still ongoing because they haven't quite managed to get the money for the actual plant generation. But the opportunity would be there that they would say that the cost of getting the heavy fuel oil from port, Port, which port, to get it from port to Kitwe would be about a third of the cost. Because they would be able to once they get the route going, instead of bringing the copper back on the trucks, they could put it on the rail cars. With the bags. And copper is very heavy, so they could learn much more and much quicker onto rail. But these opportunities I face them all the time. Although there's no reason not to use the bags, especially for non-HESCAM. I mean, there's no risk. When I say no risk, there's a loss of product. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but no ecological risk as such.
Well, the bag is fine. It's just what happens if it derails.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's. I suppose that's another risk. It doesn't happen very often, but I think even a container. Yeah. But even liquid containers would crack. Yeah. Or could break. The funny enough, we've had one of the side tippers in Tet fall over, and the bag just rolled out.
Okay, so that's good.
You know, so there's strength and flexibility. Let's call it that.
And like
rigid is
steel beast. Yeah. How would companies get hold of you, and like what is your internal process?
Okay, yeah. So we are a relatively small company. We're only 13 people. The advantage, of course, is that we're very quick. So, for instance, we have the problem in Mozambique, in the northern Mozambique, with the cyclone. Within 4 days, we create water bags for them. I mean, there's no drinking water up there. Yes. I mean, that's the first thing that disappears. So we get a call from the International Red Cross. Yes. Within 4 days, we got 5 bags of 50,000 liters that are up there. Wow. So we have got a very quick turnaround time. We have a very, because it's rapid deployment, I mean, we supply the army, we use for our fuel, and I'm digressing a little bit, we use American military specification material to hold HESCAM. So it's really tried and tested stuff. It's expensive, but it works. So there's a website, www.flexitanksystems.com, and there's a phone number on the website and anywhere else you want to look. Fantastic. Okay. Thanks for inviting me. It was very nice to share some ideas.